The lights in the Great Council chamber flickered as another report came through the communication system. Dr. Elena Cruz watched the massive holographic display showing 3-star systems that no longer existed, where billions of lives had thrived. Just days ago, there was now only empty space and debris. She shifted in her seat at the back of the room, feeling very small among the 12 alien species that made up the Galactic Council. The crystalline conference table stretched before her, its surface reflecting the worried faces and strange forms of beings from across the galaxy. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few seemed to be made of living metal. The sounds they made filled the air with clicks, whistles, and strange humming noises. Admiral Zek stood at the center of the room, his blue skin darker than usual. The tall Altarian's gill slits opened and closed rapidly as he spoke. Elena had learned this meant. He was very stressed. "The situation grows worse by the hour," Zek said, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. "Our most powerful weapons cannot stop them. The Void Swarm absorbs everything we throw at them and becomes stronger." A creature that looked like a giant mantis raised one of its sharp arms. This was Ambassador Click of the Insectoid Collective. When it spoke, its voice sounded like breaking glass. "My people's hive ships carried weapons that could crack planets," Click said. "The swarm took our weapons and used them against us. 3 of our colony worlds are gone." Elena watched as a being made of living crystal began to glow brighter. The Caridian representative was using its telepathic powers to share images directly into everyone's mind. Elena felt the touch of the alien thoughts and saw flashes of the battle. Ships the size of moons, covered in what looked like black and living tissue, moving through space like hungry animals. They ate everything in their path. The images made her stomach turn. She had seen war footage from Earth's history, but this was different. This was not armies fighting armies. This was something that wanted to consume everything alive. "Our mind warriors tried to break into their consciousness," the Caridian said, its voice like singing crystal. "But there is nothing there to break. They think as one being, and that being wants only to feed and grow." An old creature covered in wrinkled gray skin spoke next. This was Elder Voth, one of the ancient Vorthak who could bend space and time with their technology. "We opened holes in reality itself and dropped weapons into their ships," Elder Voth said slowly. "They learned to close our holes and then opened their own. Now they can travel through dimensions just as we do." The room fell silent except for the sound of various alien breathing and the hum of the space station's engines. Elena could feel the fear in the air. These were the most powerful species in the galaxy, and they were losing badly. Admiral Zex turned to face the holographic display. Again, red markers showed where the swarm had been spotted. The pattern was clear. They were moving toward the center of the galaxy, where most of the civilized worlds were located. "At their current speed, they will reach the core worlds in 60 days, Zex said. "We estimate that within 6 months, half the galaxy will be consumed." Elena had been quiet during the entire meeting. Earth was new to galactic politics. Humans had only been discovered 200 years ago when one of their primitive spaceships had been found drifting near a trade route. Most of the species here thought humans were barely smart enough to be called intelligent. She remembered the first time she had seen Earth from space after joining the Galactic Council's Science Division. Her planet looked so small and fragile, compared to the massive cities and ring worlds that other species had built. Humans still lived on just one world and a few small colonies. They could not even travel faster than light without using technology borrowed from other species. But Elena had studied the reports about the swarm, and something bothered her about the way everyone was thinking about the problem. A soft chime filled the room as another message arrived. A hologram of a Caridian general appeared above the table. His crystal body was cracked and dim. "The Draxus system has fallen," the general reported. 17 billion souls lost. "The swarm is moving faster than before." The message ended, and the room erupted in panicked sounds. Some delegates began talking rapidly in their own languages. Others sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Click's sharp voice cut through the noise. "We must evacuate the remaining systems." Save who we can and retreat to the outer rim? And then what? Elder Voth asked. Wait for them to follow us there? They will not stop until everything is consumed. Admiral Zex raised his hand for silence. We have tried every weapon, every strategy, every technology we possess. Perhaps it is time to accept that we cannot win this war. Elena felt her heart racing. She had listened to hours of tactical reports and scientific analysis. Everyone was approaching the problem the same way. They were thinking like their enemies could be reasoned with or fought using normal military tactics, but the swarm was not normal. It was something else entirely. She cleared her throat softly. The sound seemed very loud in the quiet room. Several alien heads turned toward her. She saw curiosity in some eyes and dismissal in others. Dr. Cruz, Admiral Zex said, you have been very quiet. Does your species have any insights to offer? Elena stood up slowly. She was much shorter than most of the other delegates, and her simple human features looked plain next to their exotic appearances. I have been studying the reports, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I think we might be approaching this wrong. Ambassador Click made a sound like metal scraping against stone. The primitive humans think they can solve what we cannot. Elena felt her face grow warm, but she continued. Every strategy you have tried follows logical patterns. Your weapons are designed to work in predictable ways. Your tactics follow rules that make sense? Of course they do, the Caridian representative said. Logic and order are the foundations of civilization. But what if that is exactly why you are losing? Elena asked. What if the swarm can beat you because you are too predictable? The room fell silent again. Elder Voth leaned forward in his chair. What do you mean, young human? Elena took a deep breath. On Earth we have survived many wars and disasters, not because we were stronger or smarter than our enemies, but because we learned to be unpredictable, to change our methods when the old ones stopped working. Admiral Zex's gill slits fluttered. Elena had learned this could mean amusement or disgust. You suggest we abandon logic and reason? Zex asked. I suggest we try something the swarm has never seen before, Elena replied. Something chaotic and unpredictable. Something human. The delegates began talking among themselves in urgent whispers. Elena could hear doubt and fear in their voices. But she could also hear something else. Desperation. Another chime announced a new message. This time it was news that 2 more systems had fallen to the swarm. Elena watched the holographic display update with more red markers. Time was running out. Admiral Zex looked around the room at the other delegates. We will vote, he announced. All in favor of giving the humans access to our resources and technology? The vote was close. Elena counted the raised hands, arms, and tentacles. 7 for 5 against. The motion passes, Zex said. May the ancestors forgive us for what we are about to unleash. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had gotten what she asked for, but Admiral Zex's words worried her. Did he fear the swarm, or did he fear what humans might do with galactic technology? As the meeting ended and the delegates began to leave, Elena stared at the holographic display. The red markers showing the swarm's advance looked like a disease spreading through the galaxy. But now, for the first time since the attacks began, she felt a spark of hope. Humanity was about to enter the war, and the galaxy would never be the same. Captain Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and looked around Titan Base. The research facility was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It floated in space near Saturn's largest moon, its metal walls stretching for miles in every direction. Alien technology hummed through the corridors, and strange lights pulsed in patterns that hurt his eyes to watch. This place gives me the creeps, said Dr. Lisa Park as she walked beside him. The xenobiologist carried a bag full of human research equipment that looked primitive compared to the alien devices around them. Everything here thinks in ways we can't understand. Commander Ryan Hayes followed behind them, his military training, making him study every corner and doorway they passed. At least they're sharing their data with us, he said. Even if they think we're too stupid to help. The 3 humans had been chosen to lead Earth's contribution to the war effort. Jake was a spaceship captain who had spent years exploring the edges of human space. Lisa studied alien life forms and had worked with the Galactic Council for 5 years. Ryan was a tactical expert who had studied every human war from ancient times to the present. They were met by a tall alien with golden skin and 4 arms. This was Research Director Quinn of the Technological Union. His species was known for building the most advanced computers in the galaxy. "Welcome to Titan Base," Quinn said, his voice sounding like music. "I must admit we were surprised when the Council decided to include humans in this project. Your species lacks the mental capacity for advanced pattern analysis." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "We're here to help however we can." Quinn led them through corridors filled with alien researchers. Jake saw beings made of living metal working on quantum computers, crystalline creatures manipulating energy fields with their thoughts, and floating gas clouds that somehow held tools with invisible hands. "We have gathered all available data on the Void Swarm," Quinn explained as they walked. "Every attack, every weapon test, every failed defense. Our greatest minds have been studying the patterns for months." They entered a massive chamber filled with holographic displays. The walls showed star maps, tactical analyses, and biological scans of swarm creatures. Dozens of alien scientists worked at stations that looked more like art sculptures than computers. "This is everything we know about the enemy," Quinn said, gesturing to the displays. "Perhaps your primitive pattern recognition will notice something we have missed." The alien walked away, leaving the 3 humans alone among the advanced technology. Lisa whistled softly as she looked at the data streams flowing through the air around them. "There's enough information here to study for years," she said. Ryan was already examining the tactical displays. "Look at these attack patterns. The aliens are right about one thing: the swarm is incredibly organized. Every assault follows perfect military doctrine." Jake moved to a display showing the timeline of swarm attacks. Red markers showed where they had struck, and blue lines tracked their movement through space. At first glance, it looked random. But as he studied it longer, something bothered him. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "What doesn't?" Lisa asked, joining him at the display. Jake pointed at several attack sites. "Look at these systems." The Carinth cluster had huge mining operations. The Zephyr worlds were major trade hubs. "Those make sense as targets." "So," Ryan said, "but what about these?" Jake highlighted other attack sites. The quiet zones, remote research stations. Places with almost no strategic value. Lisa studied the pattern Jake was showing them. Maybe they needed resources from those places? "That's what the alien researchers think," Jake said. "But look at this." He pulled up resource data for each attacked system. Some of the places they hit were resource poor. Others were rich in materials they didn't take. Ryan frowned as he looked at the data. "You're right. If they just wanted resources, they would have hit different targets." The 3 humans spent the next several hours going through the data in ways the alien researchers had not tried. Instead of looking at the attacks as military campaigns or resource gathering, they began looking for other patterns. Lisa made the first breakthrough while studying biological samples from destroyed swarm drones. The aliens had focused on the creatures' technology and weapons, but Lisa looked at their genetics. "Jake, Ryan, come look at this." She called from her station. The 2 men joined her as she displayed a genetic analysis on the holographic screen. "These creatures aren't just artificial constructs," she said. "They show signs of rapid evolutionary adaptation. Each generation of drones that attacks is different from the last." "Different how?" Jake asked. "They incorporate defenses against whatever. Weapons were used on them before," Lisa explained. "But that's not the strange part. Look at these genetic markers." She highlighted sections of the DNA code that glowed bright red on the display. "These are sequence patterns from different species," she continued. "I can identify at least 12 distinct alien genetic signatures in these samples." Ryan leaned forward. "You mean the swarm is made up of multiple species?" "Not exactly," Lisa said. It's more like they've taken pieces from different species and merged them together. But not randomly, they seem to be selecting specific traits. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. What kind of traits? Lisa pulled up more data. Combat abilities from warrior species. Healing factors from regenerative beings. Sensory organs from hunters. It's like they're building the perfect creature by taking the best parts from everyone they encounter. While Lisa worked on the biological data, Ryan had been studying tactical reports from failed defenses. His military training helped him see things the alien strategists had missed. "I've been looking at how different species fight," he said. "And I think I know why the swarm keeps winning." He brought up displays showing battles between the swarm and various alien fleets. Every species in the galaxy fights in predictable ways, Ryan explained. The Altarians use formation flying and coordinated attacks. The Caridians rely on telepathic coordination. The Vorthak use dimensional tactics. "That sounds smart," Jake said. "It is smart," Ryan agreed. "But it's also predictable. Once the swarm sees how a species fights, they adapt to counter those tactics. Look at this." Ryan showed them a series of battles. In the first encounter, Altarian formation tactics worked well against swarm ships. But in each following battle, the swarm responded better to the same tactics. By the fourth encounter, Altarian forces were being destroyed. "It's the same pattern with every species," Ryan said. "The swarm learns their fighting style and then develops perfect counters." Jake studied the tactical data and felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. "Lisa, you said they're collecting genetic traits from different species?" he asked. "That's right." "And Ryan, they're learning and adapting to every fighting style they encounter?" "Exactly." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his teammates with a grim expression. "I don't think the swarm is just trying to conquer the galaxy," he said. "I think they're trying to collect it." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "Think about it," Jake said. "They don't just destroy civilizations, they study them first. They take genetic samples, learn their fighting techniques, and absorb their technology. Then they move on to the next species." Ryan's eyes widened as he understood. They're not invaders, they're collectors. "But collecting for what purpose?" Lisa asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the research facility. Emergency lights flashed red as alien voices announced something in languages the humans didn't understand. Research Director Quinn rushed into the chamber, his golden skin pale with fear. "The swarm has been detected at the edge of this system," he announced. "They will be here within hours." Jake felt his heart racing. "Are they attacking the base?" "No," Quinn said, his forearms trembling. "They sent a single probe ship. It scanned our facility and then retreated." Lisa looked at Jake and Ryan with growing alarm. "They were studying us." Jake nodded grimly. "They know humans are here now. And based on everything we've learned, that means we're next on their collection list." As evacuation alarms continued to sound around them, Jake realized they had solved part of the mystery about the swarm, but the answer was more terrifying than the question had been. The swarm wasn't just destroying the galaxy. They were building something new from its pieces. And now they knew about the one species they hadn't collected yet. Humanity. The three humans looked at each other with the same thought. They had to get this information back to Earth, but they also had to hope. They weren't already too late. Outside the facility's windows, space looked empty and peaceful. But somewhere in that darkness, something was watching them. Something that had just learned humans existed, and Jake was certain it would be coming for them soon. The alarm sirens on Mars Station screamed through the corridors as Lieutenant Amy Foster ran toward the command center. Outside the reinforced windows, she could see the black shapes of swarm probe ships moving between the red planet's moons. They looked like metal insects the size of buildings, their surfaces covered in what appeared to be living tissue. "How many are there?" Amy shouted over the noise as she burst into the command room. Sergeant Pete Collins looked up from his scanner. Display. 12 confirmed, but more are coming through the jump point every few minutes. Amy studied the tactical display showing Mars and its surrounding space. The swarm ships were not attacking in the organized formations that had destroyed alien fleets. Instead, they seemed to be testing the human defenses, probing for weaknesses. They're learning how we fight, she realized, just like they did with the other species. But Amy had studied the reports from Titan Base. She knew the swarm adapted to predictable tactics. So she decided to be unpredictable. Collins, take half the defense platforms and start firing at random intervals, she ordered. Don't aim for their ships. Aim for empty space around them. Ma'am? Collins looked confused. Trust me, Amy said. Rodriguez, I want you to launch our mining charges toward their formation, but set them to explode at different times. Make it look like our timing systems are broken? The defense coordinator stared at her. Lieutenant, that's not standard military doctrine. Good, Amy replied. Because standard military doctrine is exactly what they're expecting. Through the station's communication system, she could hear alien observers from the Galactic Council trying to understand what the humans were doing. A Caridian tactical expert was sending confused telepathic messages about the chaotic and illogical human response. Admiral Zex's voice came through the speakers. Lieutenant Foster, your defensive pattern makes no sense. You appear to have no battle plan. That's the point, sir, Amy said as she watched her crews carry out the strange orders. We're making it up as we go. The swarm ships reacted to the human attacks in ways that surprised everyone watching. When the randomly timed weapons fire began, the probe ships tried to predict the pattern. But there was no pattern to predict. Some shots came quickly, others slowly. Some aimed at the ships, others at empty space. The mining charges that had been launched like broken missiles suddenly became deadly when they exploded at unexpected moments. Swarm ships that had moved to avoid the predicted explosion points found themselves caught in blast zones they hadn't calculated. They're confused, Collins reported with amazement. The swarm ships keep changing their approach patterns, but they can't figure out what we're going to do next. Amy grinned as she watched one of the probe ships fly directly into a spread of mining explosives because it had calculated the wrong safe path. That's because we don't know what we're going to do next either, she said. Dr. Lisa Park was watching the battle from her laboratory on Earth when she made her most important discovery. Yet, she had been studying the brain scans of human soldiers and comparing them to the neural patterns of other species. Every alien species in the galaxy showed organized, predictable thought patterns. Caridian minds worked like crystal formations, with thoughts flowing in perfect geometric shapes. Altarian brains operated like flowing water, smooth and coordinated. Even the chaotic insectoids thought in patterns that could be mapped and predicted, but human brains were different. Each person's neural activity was unique, and even the same person would think differently from day to day. The patterns changed, constantly, influenced by emotions, memories, and random associations that seemed to have no logical connection. No wonder the swarm can't adapt to us, Lisa muttered as she studied the data. They're trying to predict something that's fundamentally unpredictable. She called up the communication link to Mars Station where the battle was still raging. Amy, I need you to try something, Lisa said. Instead of following your current strategy, I want you to change tactics completely every few minutes. To what? Amy asked while ducking as debris from a destroyed swarm ship hit the station's shields. Anything, Lisa replied. It doesn't matter what, just be different. Amy looked at her tactical display and made a decision that would have horrified any military academy instructor. All stations, stop shooting, she ordered. The human weapons fell silent. The swarm ships, which had been adapting to the chaotic attack patterns, suddenly had nothing to adapt to. They slowed their movements, apparently confused by the lack of resistance. Now what? Collins asked. Amy watched the enemy ships hover uncertainly in space. Then she smiled. Now we ram them. Ma'am, you heard me? Take the mining shuttles and crash them into the biggest swarm ship. But don't aim for vital spots. Aim for random locations. The alien observers were sending frantic messages about human insanity as 3 mining shuttles launched from Mars Station. But instead of targeting the enemy ship's engines or weapons, The human pilots aimed for what appeared to be random sections of the hull. The swarm ship tried to defend against the attack, but its defensive systems had been designed to protect important areas. When the shuttles hit sections that contained nothing vital, the ship's responses were slow and confused. One shuttle managed to punch through the hull and detonate its cargo of mining explosives inside the ship. The damage wasn't critical, but it was completely unexpected. Ben Carter was working in his marine biology lab when the reports from Mars began coming in. As a scientist who studied ocean life, he had been assigned to help analyze swarm biological samples, but the battle footage made him think about something else entirely. "Dr. Park," he called through the communication system, "I think I know why humans are different." Lisa's voice came back over the speakers. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about evolution," Ben said as he pulled up data about various species. "Every alien race we've met evolved to fit perfectly into their environment. The Caridians developed crystal-based thinking because they come from a world of living minerals. The Altarians became water-based because their planet is mostly ocean. So? But humans didn't specialize," Ben continued. "We stayed generalists. We can live in forests, deserts, mountains, or islands. We eat meat and plants. We use tools and our hands. We never became perfectly adapted to one environment." Lisa was quiet for a moment as she understood what Ben was suggesting. "You mean every other species optimized themselves for survival?" she said slowly. "But humans stayed unoptimized?" "Exactly," Ben said. "And that makes us unpredictable in ways they can't understand." Back on Mars Station, Amy was discovering just how true that was. The swarm ships had adapted to every military tactic used by galactic civilizations. But they had no defense against strategies that changed randomly, weapons that fired without patterns, and attacks that made no logical sense. As the last probe ship retreated from Mars, Amy sat back in her command chair and realized something. That scared her more than the swarm. Admiral Zex's voice came through the communication system. "Lieutenant Foster, your tactics were effective, but also deeply disturbing." "Why disturbing, sir?" Amy asked. "Because if humans can be this unpredictable against enemies," Zex replied, "how can we be certain you will remain predictable as allies?" Amy felt a chill run down her spine. She had been so focused on defeating the swarm that she hadn't thought about what their victory might mean for the rest of the galaxy. Dr. Park's voice joined the conversation from Earth. "Admiral, I've been studying human neural patterns. We're not just unpredictable in battle. We're unpredictable in everything we do." "Meaning?" Zex asked. "Meaning humans don't just solve problems," Lisa said quietly. "We change the nature of the problems themselves. We don't adapt to situations. We adapt situations to us." The communication channel fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. The galaxy had asked humanity to help them fight an enemy that adapted to everything. But in doing so, they had introduced something equally dangerous, a species that could not be adapted to. Ben Carter spoke into the silence. "Admiral, I think we need to talk about what happens after we win this war." "If we win," Zex corrected. "No." "Sir," Amy said from Mars Station as she watched her crews celebrate their victory. "When we win. Because now I understand something about humans that even we didn't know." "Which is?" Amy looked out at the red planet below and the stars beyond. "We don't just survive impossible situations, Admiral. We turn impossible situations into opportunities." As the reports from Mars spread throughout the galaxy, species that had welcomed human assistance began to have second thoughts. The swarm was terrifying because it consumed everything. But humanity was terrifying because it changed everything. And change, every civilization had learned, was often more dangerous than destruction. Captain Jake Morrison floated in the airlock of the captured swarm vessel, trying not to think about what he was about to do. The ship's interior looked like a nightmare made of metal and flesh. Walls that seemed to breathe surrounded corridors, filled with a dim red light that hurt his eyes. "Remember," Dr. Elena Cruz said through his helmet radio, "you're not trying to destroy anything. You're trying to infect their system with chaos. Jake checked his equipment one more time. Instead of weapons, he carried devices that Dr. Lisa Park had designed. They looked like simple computer tablets, but each one contained something the galaxy had never seen before: digitized human thought patterns. "How does this work again?" asked Corporal Danny Walsh, one of the Marines floating beside him. "We'd plug these into their control systems," Jake explained. "The devices will start feeding random human neural patterns into their collective consciousness, and that will stop them." "We hope," Jake said, though he wasn't sure himself. Behind them, Lieutenant Amy Foster led the second infiltration team. Her success at Mars had made her the expert on unpredictable tactics. But this mission was different. They weren't fighting the swarm ships from outside. They were going inside them. "Teams ready?" came Admiral Zex's voice over the communication system. "As ready as we'll ever be," Jake replied. "Then may whatever gods you humans believe in protect you," Zex said. "Because what you're about to attempt should be impossible." The airlock opened, and Jake led his team into the swarm ship. The corridors were worse than he had expected. The walls were covered in what looked like veins carrying glowing fluid. Strange organic growths hung from the ceiling like sleeping bats. But worst of all were the sounds, a constant humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "It's like the whole ship is alive," whispered Marine Sarah Kim as they moved deeper into the vessel. Jake had to agree. Every surface seemed to pulse with a slow heartbeat. The floor beneath their feet felt warm, even through their protective suits. They followed the map that Dr. Park had created from her analysis of swarm technology. Their target was the ship's central core, where the collective consciousness that controlled all swarm activity was housed. As they moved through the corridors, Jake began to see things that made his stomach turn. Chambers filled with what looked like alien body parts floating in green liquid. Rooms where different species' technology had been merged together in impossible ways. And everywhere the sense that something vast and alien was watching them. "Jake," Amy's voice came through the radio. "You need to see this." Jake's team met Amy's group at a junction where several corridors came together. Amy was standing in front of a large window that looked into a massive chamber. Inside, Jake could see something that would haunt his dreams forever. Thousands of transparent containers filled the space, each one containing what looked like a living brain connected to cables and wires. But these weren't just any brains. Jake could see the distinctive crystal formations of Caridian minds, the flowing neural structures of Altarians, and the complex networks of dozens of other species. "Those are the consciousnesses of every species the swarm has absorbed, Doctor," Cruz said through the radio from her position on the command ship. "They're not dead. They're being used as part of the collective mind." Jake felt sick as he realized what he was seeing. The swarm didn't just kill the species it conquered. It kept their minds alive and forced them to be part of its consciousness. "How many are there?" Sarah asked in a horrified whisper. "Millions," Amy replied. "Maybe billions." They moved on, but the image of those preserved minds stayed with Jake as they approached their target. The central core was a massive sphere covered in organic growths and technological devices that defied understanding. "This is it," Jake said. "Everyone ready?" His team began connecting their chaos devices to different parts of the core. The tablets immediately started uploading human thought patterns into the swarm's collective consciousness. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the humming sound that filled the ship began to change. It became less organized, more chaotic. "It's working," Dr. Park's voice came through the radio. "I'm detecting disruptions in their communication network." But Jake noticed something else was happening. The human thought patterns flowing through the chaos. Devices were having an unexpected effect on his team. Corporal Walsh suddenly stood up straighter, his eyes taking on a strange glow. "I can hear them," he said in a voice that didn't sound quite like his own. "I can hear all of them. Every mind they've taken, they're screaming." Sarah Kim gasped and pressed her hands to her helmet. "There are so many voices. They're all talking at once." Jake felt it too. Something was flowing back through the connection, giving him access to knowledge and abilities that shouldn't be possible. He could suddenly understand how the swarm's technology worked. He could sense the location of every ship in their fleet. But the knowledge came with a price. He could feel his own thoughts becoming less human. "Jake, get out of there!" Dr. Cruz's voice was urgent. "The chaos seeds are planted? You need to leave before the exposure affects you more." But as Jake tried to lead his team away from the core, he discovered something that changed everything. Deep within the swarm's collective consciousness, he found the truth about their origin. The swarm had been created by a species called the Perfected Ones. Long ago, they had achieved exactly what the swarm now sought: complete unity and coordination. Every member of their species thought the same thoughts, felt the same emotions, and worked toward the same goals. They had eliminated chaos, conflict, and unpredictability from their existence. They had become perfect, but perfection, Jake realized, was a trap. Without chaos and change, the perfected ones had stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped evolving. They had become so unified that they could no longer adapt to new situations. So they created the swarm to find and collect the one thing they had lost: the unpredictability that drives evolution and growth. "They're not trying to conquer the galaxy," Jake said as understanding dawned on him. "They're trying to save themselves." "What do you mean?" Amy asked. "The perfected ones made themselves too perfect," Jake explained as his team made their way back through the ship's corridors. "They lost the ability to change and grow. So they created the swarm to collect the chaos and unpredictability from other species." Dr. Cruz's voice was grim. "And now they've found the most chaotic species in the galaxy." As Jake's team reached the ship's exit, he could feel the chaos they had introduced spreading through the swarm's network. The collective consciousness was fragmenting, breaking apart into smaller pieces that could no longer coordinate perfectly, but the victory felt hollow. Jake could still feel alien thoughts mixing with his own. Walsh could now interface directly with swarm technology. Sarah had developed the ability to sense other minds across space. They had gained incredible abilities, but at the cost of some of their humanity. "The mission is complete," Jake reported as they returned to their own ship. "The chaos seeds are spreading through their network." "And what about your team?" Admiral Zex asked. Jake looked at his Marines, who now seemed to glow with an inner light that hadn't been there before. "We're different now," he admitted. "The exposure changed us." Through the viewports of their ship, they could see the swarm fleet beginning to break apart. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination were now flying in random directions. The collective consciousness that had held them together was dissolving into chaos. But as Jake watched the enemy fleet fragment, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had won the battle by becoming something other than human. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he could still hear the voices of billions of absorbed consciousness, finally free but forever changed. The galaxy's salvation had come at a price none of them had expected to pay. 6 months after the chaos seeds had been planted, Dr. Elena Cruz stood in the observatory of New Harmony Station, watching something that should have been impossible. Through the massive windows, she could see what had once been the swarm's main fleet. But they were no longer the swarm, where thousands of ships had once moved in perfect formation. Now hundreds of smaller groups traveled in different directions. Some ships had grown new structures that looked like flowers made of metal. Others had changed color, glowing with soft blues and greens instead of the harsh red that had marked swarm vessels. "They're evolving," said Dr. Lisa Park as she joined Elena at the window. "Each fragment of the old collective consciousness is developing its own identity." Elena nodded, though the sight still amazed her. The chaos that humans had introduced into the swarm network had not destroyed them. Instead, it had freed them to become something new. "How many different groups are there now?" Elena asked. "We've identified over 300 separate factions," Lisa replied. "Some are trying to rebuild the collective. Others are exploring completely new forms of existence. A few have even asked to join galactic civilizations as independent beings." Through the communication system, they could hear Admiral Zex coordinating with various alien leaders about how to handle this new reality. The Altarian fleet was dealing with a group of former swarm ships that wanted to learn about emotions. The Caridians were trying to communicate with fragments that had developed individual personalities for the first time in millions of years, but not all the news was good. What about the ones that fled to the Outer Rim? Elena asked. Lisa's expression grew serious. Those concern me the most. They've taken the chaos we introduced and are using it to experiment with forms of consciousness we can't understand. Some of our long-range scouts report seeing things that defy physics. Before Elena could respond, Captain Jake Morrison entered the observatory. He moved differently now, with a fluid grace that seemed almost alien. His eyes held flecks of light that hadn't been there before his exposure to the swarm consciousness. "The Galactic Council is ready for our report," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made it sound like multiple people speaking at once. Elena studied her friend's changed face. Jake was still human, but he was something more as well. All the humans who had been exposed to the swarm consciousness during the infiltration missions had returned different. They could interface with alien technology, sense thoughts across space, and understand concepts that normal humans found impossible to grasp. But they were still human enough to be unpredictable. The three of them made their way to the council chamber, where representatives from dozens of species had gathered. The room buzzed with nervous energy as beings who had ruled stable civilizations for millennia tried to adapt to a galaxy that was changing every day. Admiral Zex stood at the center of the room, his blue skin pale with stress. "Dr. Cruz, please give us your assessment of the current situation." Elena stepped forward, feeling the weight of every alien gaze upon her. "The immediate threat is over," she began. "The swarm as a unified force no longer exists. But what we have now is more complex." She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Instead of the red markers that had once shown swarm positions, the display now showed hundreds of different colored dots representing the various fragments. "Each fragment has become an independent consciousness," Elena continued. "Some are peaceful and want to integrate with existing civilizations. Others are exploring new forms of existence that we don't understand. And a few are actively hostile." Ambassador Click of the Insectoid Collective clicked its mandibles nervously. "You have traded one enemy for hundreds of potential enemies, not enemies," Jake said, stepping forward. His voice resonated strangely in the chamber. "Neighbors." The alien delegates turned to stare at the changed human. Jake's presence seemed to fill more space than his physical form occupied. "The galaxy was stagnant," Jake continued. "Every species had found its perfect form and stopped growing. The perfected ones tried to create artificial chaos to restart evolution, but they were still thinking in terms of control and collection." Elder Voth leaned forward in his chair. "And what do you suggest we do now, young human?" "Learn to live with change," Jake replied. "Stop trying to control everything and start adapting to a universe that's alive and growing." The chamber erupted in alarmed voices. Species that had maintained the same governments and cultures for millions of years were being told to embrace constant change. Dr. Lisa Park moved to a secondary display that showed data from various worlds. "It's already happening whether we plan for it or not," she said. "Caridian colonies are reporting individuals who think independently for the first time in their species' history. Altarian worlds are seeing new art forms that break every cultural tradition they have." "The influence is spreading," Elena added. "Not just from the swarm fragments, but from contact with humans and the changed humans who were exposed to the collective consciousness." Commander Ryan Hayes, who had been quiet during the presentation, finally spoke up. "The question isn't whether change is coming," he said. "The question is whether we're going to help each other adapt to it or let fear tear the galaxy apart." Admiral Zex studied the displays showing the transformed galaxy. "What do you propose?" Elena looked at her changed colleagues and then at the assembled alien representatives. "We establish a new kind of institution. Not a government or military alliance, but something that helps species navigate constant change and growth. What would you call such an institution?" Elder Voth asked. Jake smiled, and the expression seemed to contain depths of knowledge from 1,000 different minds. The Institute for Adaptive Evolution. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species wanted to retreat to isolated systems and avoid the chaos spreading through the galaxy. Others argued for military action against the more dangerous swarm fragments. But gradually a consensus emerged. The galaxy could not go back to the way it had been. The age of stability and predictability was over. 3 years later, Elena stood in the central plaza of Darwin Station, the headquarters of the Institute for Adaptive Evolution. Around her, beings from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old galactic order, a team of humans and former swarm. Fragments were developing new forms of communication that combined telepathy with digital networks. Caridian artists were learning to create sculptures that changed based on the viewer's emotions. Altarian scientists were studying mathematics that incorporated chaos theory as a fundamental principle. But the most remarkable sight was the children. Young humans and aliens played together in the plaza, their games creating patterns of light and sound that seemed to respond to their imagination. Some of the children showed abilities that neither species possessed alone, hybrid talents that emerged from their interaction. Jake approached her, his transformation now so complete that he seemed to shift between human and something else with each step. "The latest reports from the Outer Rim," he said, handing her a datapad. Elena read through the information. Several swarm fragments had made contact with species beyond the known galaxy, bringing news of civilizations that had never been discovered. Other fragments were exploring dimensions of reality that physics said shouldn't exist. "The universe is bigger than we thought," she said. "And stranger," Jake agreed. "But that's what makes it interesting." Through the plaza's transparent dome, Elena could see ships from a dozen different civilizations docking at the station. Some were traditional alien vessels. Others were the evolved forms of former swarm ships. And a few defied categorization entirely. Amy Foster's voice came through the communication system, now carrying harmonics that made it sound like a song. "New arrival in Dock 7. It's a Caridian exploration ship, but they're reporting that their crew has developed the ability to navigate by instinct rather than calculation." Elena smiled as she watched the strange vessel land. Every day brought new surprises, new challenges, and new possibilities. The galaxy's final hope had indeed been human. Not because humans were stronger or smarter than other species, but because they carried within them the one thing the universe needed most, the ability to grow and change without losing themselves in the process. As Elena walked back toward the Institute's main building, she passed a memorial wall dedicated to the billions of minds that had been freed from the Swarm Collective. Their sacrifice had not brought peace, but something more valuable. It had brought life back to a universe that had forgotten how to live. And in the distance, beyond the edge of known space, new forms of consciousness were taking their first steps into an infinite cosmos, full of possibilities that no one could predict or control, exactly as it should be.